everyone run for the hills. No, I don't think it's
Get yourself a composting toilet.
that's probably not a bad thing to have, you know.
Okay, so welcome back everyone to Asheville Vedic Astrology.com, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology. We're talking with Channing Ayers again. This is the third in the series of 3 videos dealing with the transits in 2019, 2020 with the combination of Saturn, Ketu, Jupiter, and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. And we've also, in our previous video, discussed the important eclipses that are occurring during that time, what they mean. And in this final video, we're going to talk about the metaphysical import of these positions, these transits, as well as historically what we've seen when we've seen these transits before. So how about we go ahead and start with the history of things first, Channing?
Okay. Well, you know, these cycles are really long. They're really spread out. They're definitely these different time frames. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about 549. You know, that was the shift from the classical age or the age of antiquity or even dark ages into the Middle Age. And that was a time period where we also talked about the shift from the tropical zodiac into the sidereal zodiac, and that was also considered the bottom of the Kali Yuga. The darkest area of the Kali Yuga happened during this time frame was the fall of the Roman Empire.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was an empire that had been, it began, you know, around the 8th century BC.
Mm-hmm.
And it lasted all that time, and then we had the collapse. You know, that civilization changed.
And that was the 549?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So 549, the last time this series of eclipses occurred, happening in Capricorn, which is a sign that deals with natural 10th house things such as places of power, governments, organizations of power, corporations in our current time period. And so in this last time it occurred, the biggest empire that had been known at the time just collapsed.
Yeah, it was a series of years. I mean, it wasn't just one battle, but there were a series of invasions, and that was the year that finally crumbled.
Okay.
It finally ended. Yeah, there was a huge siege of Rome. I was reading a little bit about it, and the you know, it's the Huns and the Ostrogoths that are coming in and taking over, and I think they bribed the garrison. They bribed the soldiers that were keeping the gates closed to let them in, and they let them live. And then they came into the walls. They came into the city of Rome, and apparently they killed all the men. All the men in the city, and then they repopulated.
Wow.
With all the women. So it was this, huge massacre. But that wasn't that was basically the final battle.
This is why, being an Italian, I have dark hair and dark eyes.
Right, exactly. This is your heritage, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess that series of transits was good for me, depending on which side of the ancestry you're looking at.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to look back and say that was good or that was bad. You know, the Roman Empire is definitely a force to be reckoned with, but they brought in so much innovation and technology, aqueducts and roads and the military and cities, and you know, they had a lot of influence on how we live right now.
Right.
So the fall of that didn't necessarily kill all of the inventions that came from that. It's just that empire no longer ruled the world.
Right. So it was just a collapse of, well, not just, but it was a collapse of the current most powerful body of organized people. Right. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
And it's interesting, that's also when Christianity came to more of a collective rise in humanity. Before that, there were small pockets and people sharing that story and sharing that information. But this is when it really came into power. This is when it came to become more of a world consciousness, or, a larger amount of collective consciousness in that. So, this is also when, we shifted in a lot of ways of thinking. Astrologically, this is probably an important time frame too, although we don't have all of the information about this. And that was the last time that we had Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Ketu all together.
Right. Okay.
The time before that, we just had Pluto, Saturn, and Ketu all together. Jupiter wasn't involved in this one, and that was the year 47. So that was right around the turn of what we consider Common Era and before Common Era, or what we used to call before Christ and Annus Domini, in the year of our Lord. So there was a lot of shifting in consciousness around that time too. That was kind of the height of the Roman Empire. That was a really big part of their expansion of power. That was also really close to, we don't have the exact dates of the crucifixion of Christ, but it's somewhere around there. We kind of know historically that they picked the year 0 for Christ's birth, but we don't really know if it was 0 or 7 or 8 or some, but it was somewhere around there. So this was kind of an interesting time frame to look back on. This is about the time in the Roman civilization when they were invading Britain. This is when they were moving out all of the pagans and the earth-based religions, were kind of on their way out, and the Romans were coming in. And this is the year exactly of the founding of the city of London.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, yeah. What's fascinating about that, though, I know we can speak of it as being the height of the Roman Empire based on probably the size of it, but historically, when I've read about that expansion into Celtic lands and pagan lands, that it was really starting to become the fall. Like that was when it was starting to crumble because they were spreading themselves too thin.
Yeah, they were getting their butts kicked in a lot of ways too. Yeah, spreading themselves too thin and trying to take over way too much. They were getting really big.
Right, and if that was around the time that Jesus was doing his thing, that was also a specific point when the first, I guess, obvious challenges to the Romans came out. Because obviously Jesus was considered an enemy of the state.
Right, an enemy of that belief system. That whole time frame really marked this new age too, this new beginning of concepts of philosophy of that each person was connected with God, and that deserved unconditional love. That's a new theory. That was a new consciousness coming in at that time. And the idea of everlasting life, and the possibility of reincarnation being involved in that story, or so those were pretty interesting times. We can't really flash back there and go really check it out exactly the way it was, but we just have these little historical blurbs about what might be going on at that time. But the time before that,
and that is when is that? Is that the 1400 negative?
1424 BCE. So
1424. Okay.
Yeah, 1424 BCE. We had a conjunction of Pluto, Saturn, and Ketu. Once again, Jupiter was not in the sign of Capricorn, but we did have Jupiter in opposition. So Jupiter was over there in Cancer in the sign with Rahu.
Okay.
During this time frame. And as soon as I Googled that date, what came up were a couple different historical books that had placed that year exactly as being the year of the Mahabharata War.
Oh.
Now, this is a really challenged date. Nobody really knows exactly when that date occurred, or if it was handed down orally. So, there's no actual recording. We didn't have calendars. We didn't have writing. No, we had some writing, but so this is one of the proposed dates based on the events and the timelines in the Rig Veda and the rulers that were in charge and counting the years. So this is what some historians have done. But I thought it was an interesting thing to contemplate how that date looks with the transits, because for the Mahabharata war, there were a lot of rules about honor. There was a lot of the war itself as having to do with honor, and the Jupiter exalted in Cancer really gives an interesting perspective of that time frame.
Right. Yeah, I mean, also some say that around that time period, that's around 1500 BC, is that correct?
Yeah, 1424, so give or take 75 years.
Yeah, so around that same time period, some say that was around the time when like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali were not necessarily written, but when they were finally distilled into the 196 aphorisms that it is. So it's interesting, having that exalted Jupiter with that kind of combination.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing with that exalted Jupiter. I was also reading about, the Patanjali Sutra and just the different cultures, what they were focusing on. It was, there was a lot of spirituality involved in that time frame.
Right, and some astrologically, of course, these are all things that are hard to kind of pin down. But some say that astrologically that it was around that time when sign-based astrology came into play, where instead of using like the 27 or 28 lunar mansions, that the interaction between cultures, out of that came the usage of the signs as we know them, having the 12 30-degree signs which make up our zodiac. So the actual zodiac, and what they call it, horoscopic astrology, the astrology where you're creating a birth chart rather than simply using it to time events or do muhurtas and things of that nature. So that's also fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure that doing a little more research and such too would bring up historical information that's not necessarily on the internet. Right. A lot of people doing research on this kind of thing too. That's not just easily found through, but that digging into those time frames, I do see that as as a really interesting point. And we've got the opposition of Jupiter. So how that Jupiter is so strong and strengthening those planets and from such a good place versus what's going to be happening with this Jupiter doesn't have the same energy.
Right. Yeah.
So, the next conjunction that we have going back in time from that I found was Saturn, Pluto, Ketu, and Jupiter. So Jupiter is involved in this one, which is 3602 BCE.
Okay.
So, that's getting...
I don't really remember what was going on then, so if you can remind me.
I know, it's kind of hard. That's like the fourth millennium. We start getting into millenniums here now. So I started looking at it's like this whole 100-year period. And, it's hard to get exact dates of what happened exactly 3602. But, that millennium there in that time frame was the beginning of what we called the Bronze Age in the historical understanding. And it's also kind of pre-dynastic old kingdom, even Egypt, So we're getting into, a whole different religion, a whole different belief system, a whole different worshiping system, the beginnings of the use and understanding of using metal. Right. The invention of writing happened right around that time, or at least the first writings that we've discovered, the cuneiform, Mesopotamia, Sumeria, the first civilizations, the first cities, the first hieroglyphs that we start seeing. That's all from that time frame. That's way back in civilization. So it's really the beginnings of a lot of inventions that were very important in the marking of human understanding, the consciousness of writing.
And so it sounds like pretty much, based on all these previous times where we've had these kinds of conjunctions, there has been a tremendous shift in some way, whether it's discovering metal in the Bronze Age or shifts in astrology and the Mahabharata and spirituality, say through the distillation of the Yoga Sutras, to the birth of Christ and the downfall of the biggest civilization that we knew of at that time. So these are all really major shifts in our collective experience. Then, that, like you said in a previous video, they have lasting impact rather than just, gee, I'm glad we're done with 2019 and 2020. It's more of a, all right, what's going to happen and how's that going to shake up things for the ages to come, or at least until the next transit of this kind occurs.
Mm-hmm. And and I could have missed even some. I haven't been able to go back even farther, but we can see when we start getting back that far, we don't have as many details. But these are, shiftings in consciousness, shiftings in humanity's evolutionary journey. This is a cycle of the human journey, basically, and how do we play into that? How do these personal experiences that we have play into the collective shifting, the collective consciousness? And of course, there's other transits, there's other big things that have happened in the world that we can look at that don't include these types of transits. There's a lot of other transits that I haven't researched, but the reason why I focused on this particular one is because we're getting ready to have it.
Right.
And what could that be bringing in? And so it does seem to me that there's a connection with a movement in evolutionary consciousness coming up in this time frame, and that we're all going to be participating in it.
So where do you think this one's going then?
I think that this one, we talked a little bit about this in previous videos, but there's the energy of Pluto's south node. There's the energy of Saturn's south node. Looking into these concepts of how these planetary nodes are involved, not just the nodes of the moon. This does show a shift in this is the complete evolutionary culmination of this whole cycle, whole cycle of Pluto, of this whole cycle of Saturn, and this whole cycle of Jupiter. And
were the nodes of these planets involved, do you know, in the previous ones?
The nodes move very slowly. The nodes of Pluto move about a degree every 1,500 years or something.
That's what I thought. Okay, right.
They're very, very, very slow moving. So there's a very big chance that these were involved at that time frame, and I haven't quite had the opportunity to look exactly. Sorry, someone's here at my door.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll pause it. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about the wrapping up of particular cycles due to the nodes of Saturn and the nodes of Pluto being involved here.
So this might be a culmination of what we've learned over different cycles. So it could be the 500-year cycle that it's been since the last time Pluto and Saturn conjuncted in Capricorn was about 500 years ago, without the nodes, without Jupiter. It could be the end of the completion of a cycle since the last time that we had all four of these planets together, which is 1,500 years ago. The consciousness that we have gained during that time frame compared to the consciousness that we're getting ready to understand and evolve into.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So with that then, moving into the idea of the metaphysical feeling of this conjunction, what are your thoughts on that, and how should we approach this?
Well, I have a fairly strong philosophy that I chose to incarnate at this time frame for some sort of purpose, some sort of reason. And so somehow and every single person who's here needed to be here, wanted to.
Don't force your philosophy on me.
No, I'm just sharing my philosophy.
Okay.
Well, I have a strong sense when I study astrology that there's some reason why we incarnate when we do. And seeing a transit like this shows that there is a turning point. So, metaphysically, I think it's about letting go of something old to allow for something new. I think there's an aspect to this about being able to release the things, the ideas, the beliefs, the structures, the rules, the traditions that we're attached to, the way that it's been, to move into the heart, to move into Cancer, to move into the next phase that we're moving into as human, as a collective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially when we think about Cancer and that development of Cancer. In Capricorn, there's often a strong focus on either or, right and wrong, black and white. It's this way or the other way. And we see that in a lot of people, particularly when we think about sort of the political climate, where some people think they have to be extreme activists all the time, whereas other people think, what's the point? They really wish they could do something different, but they look and see how futile it seems, and then they don't do anything at all. So there's an either or approach to things. And based on what you said and what I've thought about these kinds of issues, is that Cancerian energy, it's more of an intuitive, it's more of a oceanic flowing water. It's a water sign. And that intuitive nature, the influences of water, it's not either or. It can be ice, sure, it can be water, it can be steam. Hell, you can even have a river that's got water underneath and ice on top. And I'm just using that analogy, that metaphor, to kind of bring in that understanding of Cancer as being more of a balanced approach to things need to change. And it may be that at times we have to be real extreme in that approach, but you can't maintain that extremism all the time. Sometimes you have to back off a little bit as well. So I look at it as definitely a lot of these changes, but occurring through a more balanced, efficient, and intuitive application of what calls for change, rather than just saying what is common in Capricorn, especially with Saturn and Ketu. When you look back on the past and you think, Saturn looks down, and you think, well, there's nothing I can do about it, or I am in control and I have to make things happen. So it's kind of, I think, sort of shaking off that that either or quality, in exchange for Cancer and the more intuitive and fluid approach to it.
Yeah, and I've been tapping into politically a little bit more of what's going on. I've kind of tried to, tune that out a little bit, because I have the sense that it's a bigger picture that I can't really get myself involved in. It's too painful, or it's, I can't influence it in any way. But I'm changing a little bit. Not that I need to go out there and be an activist in the sense of, this is the right political party and this is the right thing to believe, and we have to, which I think is good on one level, but it's created a much deeper process within me. And I think that this is where our energy actually contributes to the collective. It's letting go of any old belief systems, any old structures, the patriarchy, in the sense of a more dominant type of culture being better than one other, or the rulership, or and being able to tap into, like you said, that more Cancerian, intuitive, empathetic type of what is this? And politically, it helps me take a step back and realize, okay, this is all what has to be happening. First of all, nothing would be happening without, the involvement of spirit, without the involvement of the creative energy, the divine force. And this is part of a cycle. We can step back and use astrology to see, okay, this is not an easy cycle that we're going through. We're trying to break something down that's been around for a very long time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we can also see this in, the way astrology has been going lately. particularly being Vedic astrology and using, the tropical zodiac. Mm-hmm. If you think about that on some level, it's I find it fascinating in the sense that, we had a strong emphasis on Western astrology for such a long time. Mm-hmm. And people who were really into astrology were aware of Vedic astrology. But Vedic astrology itself didn't necessarily become really mainstream until, say, the 90s, when David Frawley kind of brought it more into awareness. And at that time, what happened was, and of course people were into it before that, so I'm just saying that was sort of a tipping point. But what then happened was, those who were getting into Vedic astrology were looking to the big organization of Western astrology, or that body of power that Western astrology had, said, hey, can't you make room for us too? Right? And so then what happens is eventually people start doing research like Ernst Wilhelm on zodiacs and bring up the idea, well, wait a minute, if you go back and look at a lot of these texts, there's a strong emphasis towards using the tropical zodiac. Mm-hmm. And so then this whole other contingent of tropical Vedic astrologers comes out. And now the predominant Vedic astrological culture is like, nope, can't do that. Tradition doesn't allow for it. So in a sense, they sort of brought up and became what, the more popular astrology was before they got there. And that perpetuation of that cycle just keeps on going. So what I would like to see, aside from the political things, but even astrologically, is this ability to break down those boundaries and to figure out, how to have healthy conversations between these things. Because doing Capricorn all the time with that sense of power struggle, and that there has to be someone on top, that's very detrimental to everyone overall, right? So I think I just brought that up because I think that, this is going to be influential politically. I think it's going to be influential in regards to belief systems and philosophies. And Vedic astrology was just the one that's in my mind because it's what we do. But I'm sure that there are religious ways that's going to come out, and even in regards to how people see and interact with relationships. It's going to come down to a very personal level as well. So I think if we can think about this politically, those of you who are astrologers who understand the tropical sidereal debate, if you can start to also consider how that might impact, how that quality, that energy might be also impactful in the rest of your life too, not just with these kinds of ideals, but to the very basic foundation of who we are and how we think about being human. So I think that's what's going to come out of this particular thing. I don't think it's going to be easy though, like you said.
Yeah, but I do think that Saturn there gives us a strength. It gives us the ability to endure these shifts. Even though Saturn's going to be in Aries in the D10 for part of these eclipses, it's still going to have some sense of strength in enduring these changes, or seeing the bigger picture, the truth of it. We didn't even get into all of the different aspects of Saturn that that can come into play, but it's such a complex planet, such a complex energy, and it has, like you recommend, the greatness of Saturn that has so much depth and meaning to it, and seeing how Saturn can really help mature, evolve, grow. We need Saturn in order to do these things.
Yeah, we need all the planets to do everything, and we've got to make sure we have them where they need to be, though. That's the trick. So, Okay, well, good. Well, I think we covered quite a bit in this series of talks, and I'm glad that you brought it up enough to inspire a doing of the video. So thank you for that, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening appreciate it too. So do you have any final thoughts, or do you think we've covered, what we need to for this?
I think that we've covered a lot. One of the things is just throwing out there some connection with Saturn and meditation practices and breathing techniques. Saturn's connected to any breathing movement of energy through the spine. And I think that might, this, out of all the times that we have, this might be a good practice to take up during this time frame with the Capricorn, the earth-based sign, all of these planets coming together. I think it's going to be important to bring a gentle energy to each of our lives individually, and understand that this isn't just a hard transit of the moon, or this isn't just something. This is a big deal. This is So how can we add to our own lifestyle to help this?
To give more space and detachment to see things a little more clearly rather than being reactive or falling back into those old paradigms, those old ways of being that really support, the problems that we've been having in our culture and in life in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And we can get, if anyone wants to dive more into this, you are available, I'm available for readings, just to talk about how this can affect someone personally and what kind of measures to take to be able to just move through this one with ease, the perspectives that we can adopt to move through this with a sense of understanding this is part of the bigger picture.
Right. Well, and that's a good point that Shane brings up there, is that these transits are occurring, and yes, they're going to have a global consciousness impact. But one of the reasons that we have not done so many videos on transits and so on, at least on this channel, is because in my experience, the transits are very specific to each individual. So for example, this is going to be happening in Capricorn, which means that it's going to be in the 10th house for an Aries ascendant. It's going to be in the 9th house for a Taurus ascendant, and the 8th house for a Gemini ascendant. So it's going to have a different focus based on what your actual ascendant is. So knowing that and working with an astrologer to give you that insight ahead of time can be very helpful. And so again, I will go ahead and tell you what I'm going to say to you. That way you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to say, just put your head down, hold on, and get through it. But if you want a more detailed analysis, Channing, over there, Channing at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com. She's the one to get in touch with. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, Channing. It was great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Ryan. It's good to see you too.
Okay. Be well.